So this is a video about how to use the spot healing brush tool in Photopea. And the name's a little bit misleading here because we're actually going to get into a bunch of things that are connected to the spot healing tool. Because if I made a video on the spot healing tool, it would be very, very short. It works really well to help you in certain situations, and then other situations it's not. And so this is really just a generic thing that you might do if you're trying to remove something from a photo, or if you had, sometimes you can use it to try and get rid of these wrinkles like that. And you want to be careful when you're doing things like that because you don't want to take too much away. You don't want to take, if you took away all of the wrinkles that are in my face, then I'm no longer me and everything just gets real smooth and shiny, okay? So also when you do, depending on the picture, you don't want it to look, sometimes it'll take it and kind of smooth all the pixels out and you get this kind of like, the average is too much and it just kind of takes from too many pieces and you'll end up getting a smudgy kind of picture and you can really tell that it's been manipulated, okay? So a couple of things here. So this is the power line design that we have here, all right? And you'll see over here is my spot healing brush tool, just a straight up normal. Right below the crop tool is spot healing brush tool. Now, just like we did in our other video, we also know that we can change the cursor size by making it on the bracket that is to the left, to the right of the letter P. So by going to the left, it gets smaller, and going to the bracket to the right, it gets bigger, all right? Now, you might think that, ooh, it's a great idea because I can do this really fast with this big, huge, design with the cursor being this big. But the problem is, this is what the spot healing brush does. It looks at the pixels that are around something and says, okay, based on what's here and what's here, if this thing wasn't there, this is what would probably be behind it. Okay, so we go to the beach, we take a picture, there's people on the beach, and I want to see, I don't want this person there. And I want to have beach and I want to have ocean behind that person. But if I just cut them out like normal, then I've got a hole in my design, okay? And I want to fill that in with what might have been there if that person had not been standing there, okay? So this is what the spot healing brush tool, what's one of the things that you can use it for. Like I said, you can also use it to clean up little imperfections in a design, or maybe you're restoring a photo. Somebody's got an old photo they need to have restored. That's the type of things you can do with it, all right? So if I zoom in, we're going to start out small. I got my power lines here, and I want to get rid of these power lines. And so I'm going to make my bracket a little bit smaller, and I just click and drag, all right? And as I do that, I let go, and you can see now my power lines are gone. It kind of filled it in up here. Depending on how big your design is, let me go with a little smaller bracket here, all right? Because the bigger it is, the more it's going to have to process. And as there, you see I was in sky, and then I got into cloud, okay? So it's a good idea to not just do all the way across huge long piece because you'll start getting these imperfections, which you can go back and clean up, but the bigger your selection is, the more imperfections like that you're going to have, all right? All the way across there, and I missed that one, that wasn't an imperfection. So now I can see that did a pretty good job, okay? That was a pretty small detail that it had to do, all right? I want to get rid of this number 1 down here. This, ooh, wrong button, sorry. Let's do that and then that. I want to get rid of this number 1 down here. So with this, I've got 3 different sections. So if I were to do that spot healing brush, let's make it a little bit bigger. And if I was just to do the spot healing brush like that, let's see what kind of result we get. That's not terrible. I got a little bit of the bush over here is kind of messed up, and I get a little bit of a blur in the grass there. All right, so if I were to do more and like, hey, I'm just talking about this, that's what the street is. That's what that part is, okay? And I'm not a huge fan of how it did the street over here. I'm actually going to make this a little bit smaller. Let's try and do it like that. Yeah, that's better, okay? And I'm going to show you another technique that you can use to possibly get some more of that street design and the line that's there, okay? So I don't want blue trees. I just want this thing gone, all right? So something like that. You can kind of clean it up a little bit. You can see where that, okay? All right, so that works for me. I think that's good. We got rid of our number 1. We got rid of our power line. And so now I want to start getting rid of some of these bigger pieces. And I could spend time getting rid of all of these, these little lines here, okay? And I want you to do that. But this video is more about showing you how to do something, and then you get the repetition to really kind of get good at it and see what problems pop up, okay? So this thing right here, though, it's a little bit bigger. And so let's see if I just do that, what I get. And see, it's going to average the pixels from around it, and it kind of picks up. You can see when I did that, it's actually taking an average of, not like the clouds were fine, but then it's also taking an average of these lines, the power lines. It's picking that up in the design too, because there's so much going on in this part of the picture. It's a lot harder to just use the spot healing brush tool. So with that one, I'm going to do Control Z to go back. Nope, that's fine. All right, with that one, there's a couple different choices you can do here. One of the things that you could do, if you go over and click on this, you can see that you have the spot healing brush tool, and then you also have the healing brush tool. Let's try this with the patch tool. The way the patch tool works is, if I select all of a design, if I select this is the piece that I want to fix, and I could spend more time going around and getting this more meticulous, and that would give me a better result. Instead of, see, I'm eliminating a bunch of area here that I don't actually need to eliminate. And so you say, this is the area that I want to fix. And you click and drag it over. Okay, you see how the cloud is changing. All right, and I say, I want you to replace these pixels with pixels from over here. So if I had something kind of like that, all right, and that did a pretty good job. It kind of freaked out a little bit down here where it had the pole, because it's still taking an average of what is there. It's trying to make sense of the picture. It's trying to see what you're trying to do and can it make that work, all right? So that was working for me. I could probably keep doing this down here and do something kind of like that. And let's do, maybe if I go over here. Yeah, that's working for me. Okay, so I can work with that. I could go back and hit the little power lines over here, and it's going to be easier back here because these are smaller. They take up less of the design. All right. So I'm cleaning all that stuff up, and see, it's a good idea when you get down here. And sorry, sometimes I'll do things and not say what I just did. All right. So there's one technique that I'm doing here that I'm doing and not saying, and that is Control D. All right. Control D deselects something. So as I'm making a selection, I've got my little tool here. I'm selecting something, I'm moving it over here, and then that is still selected. So if I go over here and start trying to draw again, that worked for me, but you may have problems with that. So if you have issues with what your selection is doing, because I had this happen in my last video, if you go up to select, you have an option to select everything. You can deselect, which is what I've been doing, with the shortcut is Control D. You can also select the inverse. So I've made a selection here, and if I want to select the opposite of that, then I can do the inverse. So now everything is selected except for that little dot right there, okay? So I'm going to do Control Z to go back, Control D to deselect, okay? But that's something I was doing that I didn't tell you I was doing, so I needed to kind of fix that. All right, so that is so we've talked about the spot healing brush tool. We've talked about the patch tool. ContentAware is a cool one to do, like if you've got an object and you want to move it. Let's see if I go back. I'm going to bring back my number one over here. I'm just doing Control Z to bring it back up, because that's probably a good version of something to try and do that with. I haven't actually tried this yet, so we'll see what happens. Okay, so my number one, I go, okay, that's great, number one. Maybe that's a person, maybe it's a dog, something that I want in the picture. I just don't want it there. All right, so my ContentAware, I'm going to do, I've got the layer selected. ContentAware move tool, if I draw around that thing and then I move it, okay, then it will move that over and it makes a copy of it, and it kind of thinks about, there we go. Okay, sorry, it was taking a second to process. Let me do that again. I was like, that should have worked, and it didn't. All right, so what it does is I can move this over, and then it'll look at the surrounding things and say, this isn't here anymore, what would be there? So when I let go, I just let go of the mouse, and we're going to give it a couple of Mississippis here, and that just moved the thing over, right? And I got a little bit of a problem here because I've got those different surfaces that we were talking about. You know, my road looks like it needs a little bit of construction here. But, you know, for the most part, for a couple of clicks on an online website, this is pretty good. All right, that did a pretty good job. And honestly, even Photoshop might have had a problem with some of those things based on my selection and what the picture was. All right, so that is another thing that you can do that's ContentAware. I'm not making that part of the requirement on this. Let's do that. Okay, I am going to make it part of the requirement on this. All right, because I want to see you use the ContentAware move tool. And so let's move the number one. all right? And I want to see you using the spot healing brush tool, all right? So that's another thing. And then I want to see you using the patch tool. There are other options and other things that you can do, all right? But that is the basic of what I'm looking for here, all right? Just clean up your power lines, try and get as much of this gone as possible, and then move that number 1 over to the side. And then you might want to go back even with the spot. See, I can go back, and I'm going to show you this right here because this is where you're going to get frustrated. I'm going to go back to my spot healing brush tool, and I'm going to click on my pavement, and let's change this. Let's just kind of clean that up. Let's just kind of clean that up. Let's just kind of clean that up. Why won't it let me do it? This is super frustrating. I'm trying to do the spot healing brush tool. Why won't it let me? Here's the thing. The number one thing that is going to frustrate you is when you don't have your selection right, okay? You got to have your layers, and you got to have the pixels that are on that layer selected in the right way. Because here's what it looks like. I moved that number 1, and then I wanted to go back and clean this up. But according to this program right now, the only thing that I can do if I did that, it would do it if I was inside that shape. I'm going to do Control-Z. Control-Z to undo. So it would only modify inside of these pixels here. So that's where I want to deselect that, and I can do Control-D. Now that I don't have anything selected, it says, oh, the whole picture is fair game. All right, and so I'm going, oh, that's bad. Let's go a little bit smaller maybe. Okay, I'm okay with, looks like grass is just growing on the road. We're okay with that. Yeah, that's better. We're moving it back a little bit. Okay, try to kind of clean that up a little bit. Yeah. Okay, all right, well, it's a little, like I said, it's a little under construction there. It's a little rough over there, all right? So, but move the number 1, delete the power line poles, and delete the power lines, all right? And you're gonna need to be able to use your ContentAware move, your spot healing brush, and your patch tool to do those things, okay? So that's all we got for this one. There is a lot more stuff that you can do with this. This is just a basic version of it, okay? All right, and you're gonna do that, and what your selection is also important here. So as I select, I'm just doing this part that has the fence, and then selecting a part of the fence where that's not there, trying to line up as best I can. You know, it's a little bit, the lighting is a little bit off there. I might could do something a little bit better. Let's see what happens if I go the other way. Yeah, that's a little bit better. Okay, and from a distance, you really don't see it, right? You really don't, that's fine, especially when that pole is gone. Your brain will be okay with that. When you zoom in, your lines don't exactly match up, okay? I mean, you really got to be paying attention to it to see where that line doesn't match up perfectly with that line. When you zoom out, you're just like, oh, this is a picture of a field, okay? So that's the assignment, though. Move the number, delete the poles, and delete the power lines, okay? That's it. Thanks, guys.